You should be ashamed to talk like that about your little sister. How can she not deserve everything we give her? What's happening is that you're jealous. You've always been, ever since she was born.
It's not jealousy, it's seeking some fairness. On my birthday, I asked for a tablet because I needed it for school and you didn't give it to me. Allison, on the other hand, you bought her a latest generation mobile phone when she was barely 7 and didn't even know how to use it.
We're raising her as good parents, and if you have a problem with that, maybe you should get some help.
Maybe we should have never adopted you. We were warned about the kind of people one can find in orphanages.
In fact, as soon as I began to rebel against their partiality, the idea of abandoning me solidified in their heads. One day I eavesdropped on them, and they were saying how they could return me to the system. Hi, my name is Marcia. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I had the misfortune of losing my parents in a deadly traffic accident. Apparently, a truck had failed to obey a traffic signal, causing the crash that took the lives of my parents. I had no other family besides them, so there was no one to take care of me. Hence, I ended up in the system, and for a couple of years, I spent my time traveling from one foster home to another. It wasn't exactly an ideal situation for such a young girl, considering how alone I was, but I had no choice but to adapt to the circumstances. Anyway, compared to losing my parents, having to move to unknown places and meet so many new people seemed like the least of my problems.
Marcia, cheer up. You're very young. Surely you won't have any trouble finding someone who wants to adopt you soon.
Is that good?
Of course it is. In fact, there's already a couple interested. Just be polite and you'll see how quickly they'll take a liking to you and want you as their own daughter.
I wasn't very convinced that this was possible because it wasn't the first time a couple visited the orphanage and ended up choosing any other girl but me. What am I saying? I had never even gone so far as to have any of these potential adopters request a private meeting with me to get to know me. No one used to show interest in me, so it was a surprise that the Graftons not only made an effort to get to know me, arranging not just one, but several meetings with me before deciding to take me into their home, but also finally signed the adoption papers after just a couple of months of knowing each other.
You'll see you're going to love our house. We have everything set up so you'll feel right at home.
We had been planning to have our own children for years, but it didn't work out. So the next best option was to adopt. From now on, Marcia, you'll be our daughter. And as such, you'll have all the privileges that come with it. We'll be a family, the three of us.
Soon, I was dazzled by all the kindness shown by this couple. They were right. During those first few years with them, they treated me like the daughter they always wanted. They provided me with a room of my own, made sure I received an education at the best school in town, and also made sure to meet my basic needs and even fulfill some whims. I didn't usually ask for anything or get into trouble, trying to be the exemplary daughter they wanted. And yes, we were managing to live in peace and harmony until, about 3 years later, the news came that Harriet was pregnant. It was unexpected for everyone, as we had always believed that it was something that, for medical reasons, couldn't happen.
Isn't it wonderful? We adopted a daughter and now we'll have one more. This calls for a celebration.
That's right. But Marcia, don't worry. The birth of a sister won't overshadow you or anything. We'll still be the same happy family as always.
I didn't quite understand what was happening or why they felt the need to tell me that everything would continue as usual. Something that I already took for granted, without anyone confirming it out loud. But after Allison was born, it became clear to me. My adoptive parents, perhaps unintentionally at first, started to act differently around me. At first it was subtle, leaving me out to attend to Allison or giving my little sister my things without asking me first, under the excuse that as such a young girl, she couldn't be denied anything when she threw a tantrum about it. My room, which before the couple adopted me had been the largest guest room in the whole house, was given to Allison when she was old enough to walk on her own, while I was relegated to another much smaller room. My parents stopped being so attentive to me. They barely glanced at me to make sure I ate or went to school. And as soon as I was old enough to participate in household chores, they didn't hesitate to use me as a babysitter when they were absent, often making me cook lunch for them or clean the entire house, claiming that these were tasks that were part of my education. I wouldn't have minded this if they also took turns with me to do them, but that never happened. And when Allison was old enough to help me, my parents took away all responsibility from her.
No, Allison can't do these things. What if she hurts herself trying? It's better if you continue to take care of everything, and don't make that face. Know that we'll reward you for your good work.
With an extra cookie after lunch? I don't know, maybe when I was 8 it was okay, but now that I'm 16 it doesn't seem fair. You even give Allison more treats, even though she doesn't do any chores to deserve them.
You should be ashamed to talk like that about your little sister. How can she not deserve everything we give her? What's happening is that you're jealous. You've always been, ever since she was born.
It's not jealousy, it's seeking some fairness. On my birthday, I asked for a tablet because I needed it for school and you didn't give it to me. Allison, on the other hand, you bought her a latest generation mobile phone when she was barely 7 and didn't even know how to use it.
We're raising her as good parents, and if you have a problem with that, maybe you should get some help.
Maybe we should have never adopted you. We were warned about the kind of people one can find in orphanages.
In fact, as soon as I began to rebel against their partiality, the idea of abandoning me solidified in their heads. One day I eavesdropped on them and they were saying how they could return me to the system. But with the orphanages overwhelmed with so many people and considering they had already taken care of me for many years, they soon realized it was more profitable to wait until I turned 18 to completely wash their hands of me. And until then, they made my life impossible at home, reproaching me for the slightest mistake, insulting me at every opportunity, and piling more tasks on my endless to-do list. In the end, seeing that their parents got away with abusing me in that way, even Allison succumbed to the temptation to do the same.
Marcia, go clean my room. It's a mess.
But your mother said you should clean it.
No. She said she wanted it clean by the time she came back from running errands. She didn't say I had to do the work.
That was very common with my adoptive parents. They were always finding ways to make Allison a spoiled child, granting her every possible gift and exempting her from any task that required even minimal effort. It was absurd, and as much as it weighed on me, I was aware that things weren't going to change. That if I didn't strive for myself, once I turned 18, I would end up alone and without money to sustain myself. Because the couple had made it clear that they were willing to kick me out onto the streets with not a cent in my pocket, regardless of what became of me. On my 18th birthday, instead of me getting gift that morning, my mother burst into my room.
You are 18 now. Take your things and disappear. We don't want a lazy and jealous child.
And yes, on the streets was exactly where I ended up after turning 18. Without money to my name, because not only did my adoptive family not give me anything, but they also forbade me from finding a job to earn my own salary. I was forced to live in shelters for homeless people. I suffered hardships for months until I was able to enroll in a program for young people in need. Gradually, I was able to start studying again. I got some jobs, and after a year, I got off the streets to have my own apartment. A small and not very healthy place, but that was better than nothing.
Marcia, considering your history and all your effort during these past months, we would like to grant you a scholarship to continue studying.
Me? But are you sure?
Of course. You're one of the hardest working individuals in the program, and you deserve to get a better job and have greater chances of success in the future.
And that's how, little by little, things began to turn around for me. I started working in small supermarket chains or cafes, earning the minimum to get by. I studied economics at night, and eventually, I was able to start getting jobs related to what I liked. By 24, I had lost all contact with my adoptive family, but in exchange, I owned a nice house and worked as a partner in a prestigious company where we provided financial advice. Everything was going well for me at that time, and I had no desire for anything to change because I had realized that I was better off alone, or in any case, with the people I chose. So I didn't expect one day for my adoptive parents to walk through the door of my office.
Marcia, you have to help us. We're in trouble with our personal finances, and if we don't do something soon, we could lose the house and the car.
Not only that, we won't be able to afford Allison's university. She's been repeating a couple of courses and causing a bit of chaos in the neighborhood by hanging out with the wrong crowd. But you know she's a good girl and deserves a chance.
What do you want me to do? You know my services come with a cost.
Don't be like that. We're still family. Help us for free. Although, if you insist, we can pay something. But how right we were when we said you were always an ungrateful daughter.
And I helped them, yes, but not exactly as they would have liked. I wanted them to see what it felt like to be abandoned by those they considered family without enough money in the bank to sustain themselves. So I intentionally advised them wrongly, and with that they made a lot of financial mistakes, and that led them straight into more debt. One day while I was at the office, I got a call from my adopted dad.
You deliberately advised us wrongly.
Me? You have no proof of that. Besides, I warned you from the beginning. Every investment carries a risk. Nobody guarantees it will turn out well. Not even professionals. In the end, because of their own stubbornness, everything went wrong for them. The debt they had accumulated by spending beyond their means on my sister tripled with this bad move. My adoptive parents lost their possessions and, as I heard, eventually ended up serving time in prison for non-payment. As for Allison, she also ended up sentenced to a conviction, although in her case, it was for various crimes related to the gang member she was dating, long before my parents faced financial problems. And perhaps precisely because she had always been so spoiled, she had been hanging out with the wrong crowd. She ended up dating this gang member who someone made. Allison joined the gang and they usually robbed jewelry stores. Unfortunately for them, they were caught. And now, just like it happened with her parents, karma came to collect. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button.
While she had everything she wanted served on a golden platter by my father. At 20, Zoe concluded that I wasn't meant to be in the house anymore. Of course, my dad agreed.
You don't need him since you have me, Daddy. Cut him off and let him leave.
My father did whatever his princess wanted. He kicked me out of his house without anything, not even clothes, because he got them for me. A good Samaritan, who's become my best friend now, helped me that night. Hi there, I'm Owen, and I'm currently 25 years old. I work as a nurse, and I'm, well, an orphan. My mom died when I was only 19 years old, and life was very unfair to me for 2 whole years after her death. Although, before her death, it also was. My father was alive then, but he didn't like me, simply because I was a boy. He had this unhealthy obsession with female children, and only cared about my sister. Well, adopted sister. My father had been so sure and hopeful that I'd turn out to be a girl, but my mom wanted a boy. Because he was so sure that the universe was on his side and I'd be a girl, he suggested for them to not check my gender until I was born. They both agreed on it and remained in the dark about my gender. My dad bought so many female clothings while my mom got unisex. She wasn't hooked on me being a boy, even though she wanted me to. When I turned out to be a boy, my dad wasn't happy. He showed that he wasn't, expressing frustration that the universe hadn't been on his side. For years, my dad held grudges against me for something I had no hand in. He didn't like me anywhere close to him and would yell at me for the slightest mistake. As I grew older, he began to trouble my mom too. He still wanted a female child, and they'd been trying for one, but my mom didn't get pregnant. He blamed her for it. The first time I ever got to bond with my dad was once when his company hit the highest sales. He'd been so excited that he'd asked my mom and I to dress up. We're going to have fun at the park. I was filled with happiness. My friends always talked about how they went for picnics and dates with their parents, but all I did was sit quietly and listen to them with envy. Finally, I would be able to give my own story. I couldn't stop smiling that day. I dressed quickly and went downstairs to meet him. I was 11 then. I sat beside him with a smile, and he turned to me, but looked away after. He didn't smile back, but his acknowledgement meant a lot to me. When my mom was done, we all left for the park. It was going smoothly, my parents walking hand in hand and me beside them. Well, until my father began comparing us to other families. Wow, those people have 3 girls? How lucky can they be? Unlike our family. Owen, you'd have been better if you were a girl. Unfortunately, you're just a boy. My mom was quiet and ignored him. I also did the same. I mean, I couldn't say anything to him, but I pretended to not hear him and focused on the noise in the park. He continued until he suddenly stopped a family. All your children are females? Wow, you're the luckiest. Well, you have a good-looking young man there. Him? I didn't want him. If I'd known that he'd be a boy, I wouldn't have let my wife have it.
Now you're gonna hold it right there. Why do you always look down on Owen? You brought him here to have fun, but all you've done is continuously remind him of how you hate that he came out as a boy. Why are you blaming the child as if you weren't the one who produced him?
I'd never seen my mother so angry. Her voice was high, so I was afraid that people might hear them. Most of all, I was scared of having any of my friends there. However, it seemed as though the universe was against me, because my parents were so loud about cussing themselves out that everyone around was staring at us. My world shattered when I saw my loudest friend approaching. Wow, your dad really hates you, Owen. Why didn't you ever tell us?" I was too embarrassed to say anything. I would beg him to keep it a secret, but I knew he wouldn't. I was done for. My mom grabbed my hand and pulled me away. When we returned home, my dad was nowhere to be found. The next day, I arrived at school to meet the expected. The whole school was talking about how my dad hated me. I couldn't concentrate. When I got home, I locked myself in my room and cried so much. Anyway, time passed, my dad not changing, and my mom not having a female child. After my 19th birthday, my dad brought up adoption. He still badly wanted a daughter, so he thought he could adopt one, but my mom wasn't having it. She vehemently refused, standing in her words that I was enough for them. But my dad thought otherwise. One day, they had a very big fight that landed my mom in a hospital. She was hypertensive, and getting all worked up and agitated had caused her to pass out. Her death was so quick and unexpected. I saw my whole life get destroyed when the doctor announced at the hospital that they couldn't help her. It was a traumatizing moment for me, and I grieved for a long time. And I thought my dad would respect my mom and forget about the adoption. However, 2 weeks after she got buried, he brought home a girl whom I was obviously older than. He introduced her as his daughter and urged me to get along with her. Believe me, I tried. I tried so much, but it seemed impossible. Zoe, my adopted sister, was all shades of evil. On the first day, she'd noticed the tension between myself and my dad and had easily caught on what was going on. She tortured me without pity and was having so much fun doing it. One day, with 3 of us in the living room, I brought a case up to my father. I needed to pay my tuition fees since I'd just gotten into my 2nd year in college, but my dad refused, claiming he didn't have any money to give me. Right after he barked at me for not having money, Zoe requested money for a change of wigs and shoes. It was twice more than the one I required. "I'll send it to you before night falls, my princess." I felt heartbroken. I stood up and tried to leave, but Zoe stopped me.
You only leave when I ask you to. Sit down.
I turned to my dad, hoping so much that he'd say something, but he never did. "Do what the girl says. She rules this house." I slowly lowered back to the couch, my mind scattered around different thoughts. Zoe continued that way. She was truly in control. She stopped me from entering the kitchen, restricted me from speaking unless asked. Eventually, she stopped my education, claiming it wasn't where I needed to be. I tried to fight again, but my father stood against me, and I ended up bending to their wishes. I stopped school and was made to stay home every day. Meanwhile, Zoe didn't miss class for a day. I was made to stay home and cook and clean and suffer, while she had everything she wanted served on a golden platter by my father. At 20, Zoe concluded that I wasn't meant to be in the house anymore. Of course, my dad agreed.
You don't need him since you have me, Daddy. Cut him off and let him leave.
My father did whatever his princess wanted. He kicked me out of his house without anything, not even clothes, because he got them for me. A good Samaritan, who's become my best friend now, helped me that night. He lent me his clothes and even allowed me stay in his house. He helped me get a job as a nurse after I got my nursing certificate a few years of moving in with him, and after 4 months of working, I got a small apartment. I hated Zoe and my father, so I never thought about them. One day, 3 years later, I ran into Zoe at my workplace. I pretended to have forgotten everything while she spoke to me. I got to know that my father had suffered from leukemia. They spent so much trying to cure him, all to no avail. They sold properties and took him to different hospitals, but no treatment seemed to work. Eventually, he died. The few properties he left behind got confiscated by the banks which he'd taken loans from without his beloved princess's knowledge. Anyway, she was broke, homeless, and desperately needed a job. I beamed within me. My father had received his punishment by suffering so much before dying, and the universe had brought Zoe for her share. I assured her that she was going to get the nursing job at our hospital, and she believed me. The people who'd be doing the interview were all my closest friends, and I'd opened up about what Zoe and my father had done. I asked them to give Zoe a huge humiliation while I prepared the final one. Of course, they agreed. I snuck into the office where everyone had kept their bags. The owner of the office was our boss, and he was very careless. I was sure I'd find something valuable lying around, and I did. About 8 bundles of dollar notes and a wristwatch that screamed it was expensive. Locating Zoe's bags, I dropped the items in there and zipped it close. Luck was on my side, as he had no CCTV camera in his office. The man was scared of it, so all cameras around him was taken away. That meant there'd be no evidence of me putting it in there. I left immediately. After a few minutes, Zoe rushed out of the boardroom. I could tell she was in tears. My colleague sent me a video he made of her being humiliated, and I couldn't help my laughter. Her documents were faked, and she couldn't even reply to simple questions about drugs. Everyone had laughed at her and called her several vile names, which made her run out. From the reception area where I sat, I heard my boss's loud voice ordering someone to stop. When I looked, it was Zoe. He asked if she'd seen his money and wristwatch, but she replied that she hadn't. My boss said she was the only one who'd left his office, but she maintained that she didn't steal. I passed my phone to the receptionist and asked her to start recording, which she happily did. I walked over to them. By now, most workers were watching them, alongside the other candidates and interviewers. "Excuse me, sir. I know her. She used to be my adopted sister before she sent me out of my father's house. She used to steal a lot, but I believe she stopped it now. Right, Zoe?" She looked at me with pure confusion in her eyes. Anyway, I turned to my boss, still playing my game. "Look how shocked she is. She wouldn't steal anything. I'm sure of that. If you don't believe, you can just search her to be sure." "I'm gonna do just that." He grabbed Zoe's bag from her and emptied its contents on the floor, the money and wristwatch falling out with everything else. I let out a dramatic gasp. "I'm so ashamed of you, Zoe. You've embarrassed me." My boss wasn't having it. While he was yelling at her, one of my colleagues who'd interviewed her butt in and told my boss that Zoe was also a quack trying to squeeze her way in and endanger the patients. He showed the video to him, and my boss was livid. He immediately contacted one of his police friends, and Zoe dropped to her knees, begging me to talk to my boss and begging the man to forgive her. I enjoyed seeing her that way. The police soon arrived, and she was immediately arrested. My boss pressed charges against her for stealing and lying. The state also found her guilty for carrying a fake nursing certificate around. Altogether, they earned her 8 years in jail. I posted the video of her, which the receptionist had recorded. Most workers did the same, and soon, she was everywhere on the internet. I visited her in jail to show her what she was getting popular for, and she nearly broke down the glass separating us in anger. Well, before leaving, I managed to spread news around the prison that she was a liar and a thief, and everyone should avoid her. I couldn't wait to go there again and see her looking all defeated. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
For Halloween, Jana and Hayden always let Trisha go all out. But for me, they gave me a budget of just $10 to pull something together. This wasn't even remotely close enough to how much I need to get an actual costume. I've tried a few times every year to let them raise my budget by a few dollars, but nothing has worked. They also gave Trisha the brand new smartphone every time it came out. She never had to scream or beg for anything. Unfortunately for me, I was on my knees begging a few times for the cheapest flip phone available. Hey, I'm Sarah, and I'm so glad that the holiday season has finally come. I love the holidays, and I always make sure to go all out for the kids that I care for at my job. Though I seem all happy now, Christmas used to be a source of emotional pain for me. You see, my adoptive family was the cause of all of this trauma. I'll explain everything from the beginning to the end, all the way up to the moment that I left them. My parents, Jana and Hayden, used to love me very much. I knew that they had adopted me because Jana found out that she was infertile. Jana and Hayden always took me to theme parks and spoiled me like crazy. I was happy to live with parents that actually cared about me. But only about a few months after I had joined the family, Mom and Dad had a miracle. Jana became pregnant with a baby girl. After my baby sister Trisha was born, Mom and Dad were absolutely obsessed about her. My parents stopped spoiling me completely. They now did the opposite. When we went out, they'd get Trisha anything that she could ever want. However, they berated me if I even asked for the cheapest item available. Because I was only 5 when my sister was born, I was only upset and never understood why they would just suddenly refuse to get me anything. Now that I was older, though, it seemed perfectly clear. Everywhere we went, Jana would introduce Trisha as her miracle baby. Soon enough, my sister being the miracle baby became real old, though Jana didn't care at all. There was one time where my mom was supposed to just take us and our family's dog for a checkup, but spent 30 minutes talking about Trisha. I could tell that the veterinarian was pissed, but didn't want to say anything.
Oh, hey, Susan. I don't think I've introduced you and my kids. This is Sarah, my beautiful daughter. And this is Trisha. Oh, she was my miracle baby. We had Sarah because I didn't think it'd be possible for me to have a child of my own. But then, Hay and I managed to sprout little Trisha. Isn't she just beautiful?
Aw, yes, she is.
She's been such a bright star in my life that her photos are in my wallet and phone case. She's only 4, but she has so much ahead of her, and I'm so proud of our family for being able to have Trisha.
That's so cute. So let's get started with your dog.
Do you know what her first word was? It was puppy, because she had just seen a dog cartoon on TV. Isn't that the cutest?
Yes, Jana. So the dog...
She ended up liking puppies so much that we got her one. She even named him. His name is Bruno.
I'm not going to go through that whole conversation again, but just the beginning is enough to tell you everything that you need to know. The vet ended up trying to avoid Jana as much as possible, only coming into the room to inspect our dog and make small comments on his health. Anyway, this is just one of the many examples of how my family ended up being super toxic and only caring about my younger sister. For Halloween, Jana and Hayden always let Trisha go all out. But for me, they gave me a budget of just $10 to pull something together. This wasn't even remotely close enough to how much I need to get an actual costume. I've tried a few times every year to let them raise my budget by a few dollars, but nothing has worked. They also gave Trisha the brand new smartphone every time it came out. She never had to scream or beg for anything. Unfortunately for me, I was on my knees begging a few times for the cheapest flip phone available. My only reasoning was that I needed it for communication, and the truth was, I really did. Trisha always used her phone for games or social media. Anyway, my phone was one of the only things that I was ever allowed to get after my sister was born. As time went on, I had to learn to be more and more independent, while Trisha just sat back and everything came to her as she wished. Teenage me was extremely angered at everything I had to do, but now I think that working harder for myself was one of the most useful things I'd ever done. I remember needing to apply for my own part-time job, seeing as mom and dad never let me have an allowance. I also had to fill out my own legal forms for the job and find a way to transport to work, too. Other things I remember doing was washing my clothes, cooking food, and most importantly, managing schoolwork and time. I will never forget those days in high school when Hayden went to the school to demand that Trisha was given good grades for her classes. Everybody knows that your grades are based on hard work from yourself, but Trisha hadn't gotten good grades, so our dad went to very different measures to help her manage. It was completely unfair, but you can't really stop a dad who was too lenient and had money. So that happened as well. One of the worst things, in my opinion, though, was having to watch Trisha open her mounds of gifts while I was forced to sit there and watch her open and have fun with each of them. Every year I only got socks or nothing as a gift for Christmas, and so I was basically tortured having to watch her. Of course, Trisha's birthday was also celebrated every year. She got a huge party with balloons and special guests, all planned out by party planners that were quite expensive, to say the least. Trisha was allowed to invite as many people as she wanted, and I am not kidding when I say that Trisha was very popular amongst her classmates. And with all of the love and attention for her, I was treated in complete contrast. I never got a birthday celebration, and the only time I got a gift was on my 16th birthday. My little sister had given me a small card with a $20 gift card. That was pretty nice of her. But other than that, I didn't get anything else. The most traumatizing moment that sort of sealed the deal for me was Christmas when I was 17. My whole family was invited to a big Christmas reunion, and they were quite ecstatic. Mom and Dad told me to prepare presents for all of my cousins and nieces and nephews. I was pretty happy to meet them for the first time, and I wanted to leave a good first impression on them, so I worked more hours at my job and bought many nice gifts for them. I was actually quite excited too. I thought that maybe I'd finally get a gift from them, since this was my family and maybe they're nicer than Jana and Hayden. So on Christmas Eve, our parents drove Trisha and me to their great-aunt's house. She was very rich, and I only found this out because we drove into the driveway of a huge mansion. I still remember lugging all of the gifts I had with me to the house. My sister did too. but someone soon came over and helped her with carrying her presents. We went inside and there were way more people than I expected. I was quite nervous, but I decided to hide and luckily, not many people noticed me. Dinner went by fine. Normally at home, Dad never let me eat too much since he said that he didn't want me wasting his hard-earned money, so I was always a little bit away from being actually full. Since I was on my own at this Christmas dinner, I was able to eat more, and I was happy. I thought, maybe this will be the first Christmas where things will actually go well. So apparently the whole family was supposed to stay at the mansion overnight, and then we all open our gifts in the morning. I found a guest room and fell asleep, hopeful for Christmas morning. I woke up the next day and went downstairs to see most of the family gathered around the tree. I watched as the kids were all given their gifts. Soon enough, though, the gifts for the kids were all passed out and I'd gotten nothing. The family moved on to the adults and they were all given a few gifts each. My heart sank. Where the hell were my gifts? Mom, where are the gifts for me?
What do you mean? This trip was our gift for you. And the dinner last night.
But everybody else has so many gifts. Why don't I have any?
Sarah, don't you dare throw a temper tantrum now.
Sarah, I have a gift for you. Merry Christmas.
This random lady came up to us and handed me a gift. But Mom quickly shoved her handbag into my arms and grabbed the gift out of my hands and opened it. It was a box of chocolates, and my eyes widened in surprise. A smile started spreading across my face, but it quickly diminished. Jonna began to spew out some lies about why I couldn't have the chocolate.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Lila. Sarah is severely allergic to hazelnut. I'm so sorry, but thank you for the gift. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. How about I give Sarah $50 instead? No, thank you. You're always too generous. Thank you, though.
I wanted to kick and scream like a toddler at this point. I wasn't allergic to anything at all. In fact, I'd eaten a few hazelnut chocolates before. Was my mom just lying so I wouldn't get any gifts at all? I quickly walked away from my mom and the woman, running to hide in a nearby bathroom. I began to sob, but soon realized I had Jana's purse. I wanted to open it to see when I could book a train to run away, but decided to open the texting app on her phone. I saw a whole list of texts where my mom was telling family members not to get me any gifts. The text said that I was on punishment and needed to learn a lesson, that I would get a different gift another time. This all made sense now. Everyone knew I existed, so why did they not give me a gift? I didn't want to deal with this anymore. So as soon as we got back home, I began packing my necessities, and I booked a train ticket from Trisha's laptop. Some people may find this to be overdramatic, but this had been happening for most of my life, and I was absolutely sick of it. I decided on not leaving a letter since it wasn't worth the effort to write anything for my neglectful parents. And though I resented my sister for not saying anything, she wasn't entirely horrible to me, so I wrote an apology note for her. The following week, I had just turned 18. Now that I was legally an adult, I could go. I snuck out in the morning and walked the 10 minutes to the train station. I got on my train and was finally free. Okay, so maybe it wasn't that easy. It had been 2 hours into my trip when one of the train attendants came up to me and asked if I was the daughter of Jana and Hayden. I said I was, and she told me that they wanted me home and that I needed to go since I was a minor. I quickly showed the woman my license and all of my legal documents. I explained that I was definitely 18 and was allowed to leave home. The attendant left me alone after that. I landed in this new city and things were very tough at first, but since I'd been responsible for myself for a long time and had done good in my high school classes, I was able to find an internship for this tech company. I was also lucky enough to find a welcoming family who let me stay at their home for little rent. Eventually, the tech company offered me a scholarship to one of the top technology universities in the country. I was completely ecstatic and accepted the offer. So then I attended this university and earned my degree. Right after graduation, I got a job at the same tech company again. So that's where I am today. I have a good job, good pay, and now I live in my own apartment with a boyfriend who is very good to me. Of course, I also paid the family that let me live with them back with lots of money and gifts. They still invite me over for Christmas. I finally stopped hating Christmas too. It's pretty cool how I was able to turn my life upside down for the better and get away from my narcissistic family. Oh, speaking of my family, I then recently got a call from Jana on my business number. She had seen my name as one of the main CFOs of the tech company and is now calling to get financial help from me. Mom and Dad are now becoming broke since they continue to get gifts and throw huge parties for Trisha, to the point where she's gotten very popular with kidnappers. Apparently, my parents were also asking for money because of Trisha. She'd been kidnapped and my parents had to pay the ransom money. But then, when Dad went to pick Trisha up, the kidnappers thought that Hayden had alerted the police and beaten him up until he needed to go to the hospital. I was annoyed, since Mom only called me to pay for hospital bills and to pull them out of debt. I instantly smirked and responded to her in a very cold manner. Well, you're on punishment now. I can't give you anything. Isn't that what you told all of my aunts and uncles many years back? See how it feels now? I can't be helping someone that hasn't been there for me for so many years. Bye, Mom. Tell Trisha that I miss her. I ended the call there, and I've gotten text messages from both of my parents and Trisha, but I never responded to any of it. My boyfriend says I was a little too harsh to them, but I don't think so. I would never want to let them leech my money for something that doesn't even benefit me at all. But what do you think? Thank you for listening.
Isabella, we demand that you hand over your share to your brother. He deserves it, not you. Please, can we not do this? Leave the kids to their willed properties. Let's not stir anything.
We can't, Mom. Bella has to give me her share. I deserve it more than her.
Are you crazy? How dare you? You've been treated better our whole lives. Have I ever asked for more? What the hell makes you think you deserve better?
Well, because you're adopted. You're not our real blood, Bella. An adopted child like you deserves nothing.
I was silent. A huge blow had been landed on me. I didn't want to believe it. I turned to my mom, my eyes filled with tears. I saw that she was also in tears, her face buried in her palms.
What? Are you shocked? Oh, they never told you? You're nothing but an adopted child. He's our real and only grandchild, so hand it over quickly.
You heard them right, adopted asshole. Hand it over and go find your parents. That's if you even have one.
Their evil laughter echoed in my head, clouding my thoughts and bringing more tears to my eyes. Hi, my name's Isabella, but everyone calls me Bella. I grew up in a home where partiality was. I was born 2 years after my parents' wedding, according to what I was told. My parents told me how happy they were to have me, and how their love for me was formed way before I was birthed. For the first 6 years of my life, I enjoyed life with my parents. They took me out to parks, made me always dress prettily, gave me the best education, and loved me so much. My brother was born a year after my 6th birthday. One day, I heard my classmates discussing their grandparents. They talked about how they always stayed with them during holidays, and how their grandparents spoiled them more than their parents. I sat alone, listening and envying them. When they called out to me and asked about mine, I told them I'd never seen them, and everyone burst out laughing, calling me a liar because they thought my grandparents were dead. I'd never seen my grandparents, but I knew they were alive because I'd heard my parents talking about them twice. I concluded that I was going to ask my parents when I got home. On reaching home, I did exactly that. Why have we never visited Grandpa and Grandma? My parents were taken by surprise because I'd never asked about them. They wanted to know what suddenly made me ask, and I told them about what happened at school. My parents hugged me and promised to let me see them soon. 2 days later, my parents announced that we'd be spending the holiday with them. It was all I could think about. I made plans on how I will scream when I saw them. I wondered what kind of things they wore. I remembered a mug of ours which no one had ever used and asked my parents for it. When I said it would be a gift for my grandparents, they smiled proudly and helped me wrap it. Eventually, the day arrived. I woke up very early and helped my parents with the chores. We did everything and soon it was time to leave. My heart was pounding in my chest. After nearly an hour of driving, we reached there. I stood with my parents as my mom rang the doorbell. The door soon opened and an elderly face popped out, followed by another, my grandparents. My heart was racing in my chest as I smiled at them. However, it seemed as though they couldn't see me. They both ignored me like I wasn't there and faced my brother instead. I was starting to feel sad when my parents brought their attention to me.
This is Bella, our first child.
I widened my smile as they finally turned to me. But I couldn't ignore the disgusting look they were wearing.
Is this the one you were talking about?
I looked back to my parents, and they nodded. I wondered what it was that they talked about, and I was curious, because I didn't like how my grandparents were treating me.
Whatever. Can we just go in?
Swallowed back the tears that threatened to leave my eyes as we walked in. I'd felt so bad due to how I was ignored by my grandparents while they obsessed over my brother. My mom did come over to whisper an apology and asked if I was okay, to which I accepted and said I was. Well, my hell had only just begun, because we were to spend the entire holiday with them, without our parents.
Be obedient to your grandparents, okay? They don't hate you. They'll surely come around, darling, okay?
I held on to the belief that they'll come around as my mom had said, but they never did. All I ever got from them was insults they will call ugly thing, idiot, gold digger, bloody bastard. Those names got registered to my ears barely 2 weeks later. While my grandparents absolutely loved my brother and will often buy him gifts, they despised me for no reason. They would cuss at me all day for no reason and hit me at the slightest provocation. I wasn't happy there. I didn't feel happy for even a second. I was drowning in sadness and pain. I felt like an unwanted outsider.
What are you doing sitting in front of my television? Can your parents afford that? Get lost, child.
I instantly scurried away, my eyes getting teary again. I stood by the door, watching as they sat my brother between them while watching TV. I cried to sleep that night. They were being so unfair to me. I grew up getting no love from my grandparents. My brother was the apple of their eyes, and they only cared about him. They didn't stop even after we were grown. It even worsened. My parents always tell me not to think about it, but there's no way I could ignore it. When I was graduating college, they refused to attend. According to them, they couldn't imagine themselves wasting their time on attending stupid ceremonies. Even when they were told about my excellent result, they didn't give any nice reaction.
What's so special? People do more. What should we do? Throw a feast for her?
I couldn't help but tear up. Although I was trying to get fully used to them, it wasn't so easy. Their words hurt. When my younger brother graduated high school, they were the happiest. They attended the event fully dressed and had proud smiles dancing on their faces. Those were the same people who called my graduation a stupid celebration. My brother's result wasn't so impressive, but they rained praises on him. They called him their real grandson, their sunshine, every good name they could think of. I tried my best to ignore them. About a week after his graduation, I got a job. My parents were super proud of me for getting a good job so quickly. My grandparents did downplay my efforts again, but I tried to not be triggered and ignored them. Unfortunately, misfortune struck, and we found ourselves fatherless. My dad got into an accident that claimed his life at the spot. We were all devastated. We cried for days, not knowing how to be consoled. At his funeral, our tears were fully released. My grandparents consoled my brother while I comforted my mother. There was no one to console me, but I didn't mind. Seeing my mom and brother being comforted was enough for me. A month after mourning him, his will was read to us. In the will, my dad had given quite a large part of his property to me, but gave a bigger part to my brother. Was I surprised? Well, a little. I was older than him, so I'd expected more. However, it was his properties, so I accepted his decision. But my grandparents didn't.
Isabella, we demand that you hand over your share to your brother. He deserves it, not you. Please, can we not do this? Leave the kids to their willed properties. Let's not stir anything.
We can't, Mom. Bella has to give me her share. I deserve it more than her.
Are you crazy? How dare you? You've been treated better our whole lives. Have I ever asked for more? What the hell makes you think you deserve better?
Well, because you're adopted. You're not our real blood, Bella. An adopted child like you deserves nothing.
I was silent. A huge blow had been landed on me. I didn't want to believe it. I turned to my mom, my eyes filled with tears. I saw that she was also in tears, her face buried in her palms.
What? Are you shocked? Oh, they never told you? You're nothing but an adopted child. He's our real and only grandchild, so hand it over quickly.
You heard them right, adopted asshole. Hand it over and go find your parents. That's if you even have one.
Their evil laughter echoed in my head, clouding my thoughts and bringing more tears to my eyes. My lips trembled with my whole body. I agreed to give my share to him before leaving the house. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't even want to go home. While walking, tears streaming down my eyes, I heard someone calling my name. I turned and saw my mom. She'd collapsed on the floor, sobbing heavily. I walked back to her and she pulled me into a hug, crying and apologizing for not telling me. She didn't want me to feel like an outsider. They'd cooked up the story of my birth to make me believe I was truly a part of them as she and my late father felt. She'd told me that my dad willed more to my brother, so it wouldn't seem like he valued me more. I understood that it was to avoid problems. My mom asked for forgiveness, and I surely forgave her. She'd taken care of me and never showed it to me for even a minute that I was adopted. We went home together. The next day, she tried to go talk to my brother who was already living with my grandparents, but he kicked her out, accusing her of choosing her adopted child over him. Well, I told my mom not to worry about it. We continued our lives in the small apartment I rented after my grandparents asked us to leave my father's home. I worked even harder and tried my possible best to take care of my mom. Luckily for me, I was promoted to a higher position after 3 months. I was given a house that wouldn't be taken back, even when I leave the company, alongside a company car. My mom was so proud of me. Together, we moved there. I was earning more, so life was going well between us. My mom did try to contact my brother again, but was told that he'd relocated to Canada with my grandparents. She was heartbroken to see that he'd abandoned her, but I comforted and assured her that I would never leave her. We were happy together. The next year, my boyfriend proposed to me. The proposal was planned by him and my mom. As I agreed to marry her, my mother got overwhelmed with her emotions.
I can't believe my little baby is going to get married. Oh dear, I'm so happy for you, my darling.
I burst into tears too, hugging her. I wished my dad was there, but I also knew he'd be happy wherever he was. While we were making preparations for the wedding, my grandparents suddenly visited my house. They looked so tattered. As I saw them, I knew something bad had happened. They explained that they got deported from Canada after my brother got them into trouble by drinking and doing drugs. He'd smuggled drugs into their bags on their vacation with him from Mexico, and they were caught by the police. Luckily, they'd found out that my brother had put it in there, so they were released, but immediately deported. Meanwhile, my brother was detained. They'd sold off the properties to bail him out, as huge money was required, but they'd been scammed by a corrupt judge and police officer who claimed to be able to help them, and they lost both the properties and money. The police and judge were never seen after that. My grandparents had become hopeless and needed my help. My mother and I burst into laughter. Well, I'm in the middle of planning my marriage. I can't afford to shoulder anyone right now. Besides, we're not related by blood, remember? I don't help anyone who isn't blood related. I'm happy with my mom in this mansion, which I'll soon leave for her to own alone, and the car, which will soon be hers, along with my fiancé, who's filthy rich and values Mom and I. I don't see myself being happy with you both in my lives, so I can't help. And for the boy in the prison, I have no idea who he is. After all, I'm only an adopted asshole. Now, before I ask the security to throw you both out, get out of my house.
Bella, please don't do this to us.
You heard the girl, idiots. Get lost.
They were trying to beg more, but I didn't want to listen anymore. I called out to the security guards and ordered for my grandparents to be thrown out. I intentionally rubbed my life in their faces, so they would know that my mother and I were doing well without them. I later heard they now have to work in a warehouse to sustain themselves and are constantly complaining of backaches. Their boss is a former classmate of mine. When I told him how my grandparents treated me, he intentionally made them work long hours. I later heard my ex-grandmother fell from the stairs in the warehouse and now uses crutches and can't work anymore. So my grandfather is the only one working and taking care of his sick wife. Sometimes I pity them, but then they can go to hell for all I care. And my brother can rot in jail. I heard he was given 23 years imprisonment, which he deserves even more than that. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. By the time I was 8 years old, I was doing all the chores in the house. Every day after school, I was expected to do laundry, clean the house, mow the lawn, and have dinner ready by the time my parents got home. After all of that, then I was expected to spend the rest of the evening helping my little sister Lucy with her homework. When I would forget to do a chore or didn't do it to their liking, they would make me sit in the garage and listen to them eating dinner, not allowing me to eat with them. There were a couple of days where I felt so tired from all the work that I had to do that I just sat and cried. I was confused by how much they expected from me and how little they expected from her. She could get away with anything, and I couldn't. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but they treated her differently than me for some reason. While I was expected to do all the chores, cook, and clean, she was allowed to watch all the television she wanted. She got her pick of the best toys, while I didn't get any. In fact, she had a queen-size bed all to herself growing up, and I was expected to sleep on the garage floor. It got so cold in there during the winters. It made me feel like they loved me less. One day, I asked them about it. Mom, Dad, why do you guys treat me so differently than Lucy?
We don't treat you differently.
Why doesn't Lucy have to do chores or sleep on the floor?
You have to do those things because you're the older sister, Annabelle. It's your responsibility to look after your sister and take care of her. You know how hard your mother and I work all day, and the least you could do for us while we provide for you is to make the house decent for us to live in.
The least you could do in return for all we do for you around here.
That was the mentality that I had for years about my family. I really did think that I owed them my very life, and the least I could do for the rest of my family was make theirs better and easier. I thought that was normal for daughters. It wasn't until high school that I began to question everything. I met my best friend Shelley there. She was an older sister too, and she wasn't expected to do half of the things I was expected to around the house. It confused me. I went over to her house one day after school, and she sat on the couch and started watching TV. I started to panic. Shelley, you can't sit on the couch.
What do you mean? Of course I can.
No, you need to do laundry and make dinner before your parents come home so that they let you eat dinner. That's your responsibility as the older sister. It was then that Shelley explained to me how much my parents had brainwashed me. She told me that my living conditions weren't normal at all, that they were treating me more like a slave than a daughter. That night, she opened my eyes. For so long, I felt terrible about how sad and ungrateful I was to be doing chores, and for feeling like they didn't love me as much as they loved Lucy. I was right all along. They had been tricking me the whole time. After being angry, I was left with a deep confusion. Why was it that they loved her more than me? Why did they treat me like a slave and Lucy like a princess? I sat on the couch with Shelley and thought. Eventually, Shelley said, "You know, I wasn't going to say anything, but I never did think you looked like anyone else in your family. Maybe you're adopted, and that's why they treat you so poorly? Because they view you as their servant and not their daughter." It was a suspicion that I had had for a long time, but I kept it to myself out of fear of what everyone might say. Would it be worse that they adopted me and just didn't love me in the first place, or that I'm actually their daughter and they found me completely unlovable? I was almost afraid to find out, either way. When I went home that night, I did my chores as fast as I could before my parents came home. I didn't want them to find out that I had been out. I was stressed out and confused, but I didn't want to get in any trouble. That would make me freak out even more than I already was. Somehow I managed to get everything done in time. While we were all sitting at the table, Lucy decided to say something.
Annabelle was late coming home today, so she rushed through all her chores. Did you see how terribly she did everything?
Now that you mention it, I see streaks on the window that you were supposed to clean.
How dare you leave the house without doing your chores? Don't you know how much we do for you? How much we provide for you? And you spit in our faces like this?
You never make Lucy do any chores or sleep on the floor of the garage.
Because the chores are your responsibility, Annabelle. You sleep on the floor because you never know how to do anything right. Do things right, and you can sleep on floor in the kitchen.
Ever since I was a child, you've always treated her better than me. Whenever I try to talk about it, you make me feel like I'm crazy.
You are crazy, Annabelle. Get a hold of yourself before I need lock you in the garage for the night.
I am your daughter, not your dog. Lucy laughed quietly into her fist when I said that, then continued to eat as if nothing had happened. I stared at her until she finally spoke.
No, you're not their daughter. Did they never tell you? I thought it was so obvious.
I felt so incredibly stupid and dumb to have believed such obvious lies for so much of my life. I immediately left the table, packed a few of my things, No one tried to stop me from leaving or bothered to say anything to me as I walked out the door. I spent the night at Shelley's, and her kind parents were so understanding of what was going on and angry about the way I was treated that they let me stay with them for the next few months. I couldn't believe my eyes at the difference between their family and mine. Was this how a real family looked like? Coming home to hugs, kisses, and kind words of support and love? I watched how they interacted with both of their daughters, and that's when the truth finally sunk in. Of course, I was adopted. It all made sense. The only reason why they adopted me was to be their slave. They never wanted me in the first place. They only ever wanted Lucy, and free labor for someone to take care of her. And them. Shelley and her family helped me begin to feel love for the first time in my life after that. I was a wreck, crying all the time, but they were always there for me. Eventually, it didn't hurt as bad as it used to. I was finally with people who actually cared about me. After coming home from school every day, I had so much more free time than I was used to. I was no longer expected to do any of the chores I was expected to do all my life. I spent my newfound free time looking into the details of my adoption. Clearly, I couldn't trust my parents to tell me the truth about anything anymore. For weeks, I couldn't find anything, and I almost gave up. But then one day, I remembered a piece of paper I saw laying around my old house. I looked up the name online. It was the name of an adoption agency. I quickly called the number and told them my name. I asked if I could get more details about my adoption, and they were more than happy to explain to me what happened. 16 years ago, a woman went into a bank with her child. There was a robbery, and the woman was shot and killed. The baby was turned over to foster care because the woman had no living family members, and no one could figure out who the husband was or how to contact him. The baby was adopted by a struggling family. The adoption agency was hesitant about the family at first because they suspected that the family only wanted to adopt the baby to collect on the child support payments from the state. But they passed every test and had no reason to keep them from adopting the baby. A few weeks after the family adopted the baby, the father finally appeared, looking for his daughter. He had been out of the country and just heard of his wife's death. When the adoption agency tried to contact the family had gone completely missing, along with the child.
You see, your father never wanted to give you up. As soon as that couple adopted you, they changed their names and moved to another state in order to keep the money they were getting for you. We couldn't find you anymore. Your father has been looking for you for years. We can put you in contact with him right away.
Shortly after that phone call, I met my birth father. I had actually knew of him before I even met him. Ken Thompson was one of the wealthiest men in the country. He was always on some sort of magazine cover with his latest invention. He was probably the most famous scientist in the world. When I found out that man was my father, I was so nervous. At first, I thought there might have been some sort of mistake at the agency. Surely, this man can't really be my real dad. After arranging a meeting with him, Shelley's parents drove me to his company tower. It was the tallest building I'd ever seen in my life. He met with us on the ground floor of the building. As soon as he saw me walking towards him, he burst into tears and hugged me tightly.
I was hesitant at first when they said they had finally found my daughter. So many young girls have pretended to be related to me to get some of my money, but now I'm certain.
How do you know I'm not lying?
You look just like your mother.
I found myself hesitant to trust him at first, after everything that happened with my family, but I quickly saw in him the same love that I saw while I was staying with the Shelleys. All he wanted to do was spend time with me and get to know me. He said he needed to make up for lost time. If I so much as said I liked something, I would find it on my bed in the Shelley house the next day, wrapped neatly in a gift box. Soon, he begged me to move into his penthouse with him, and I agreed. He had so many servants in his house. I never had to clean up after myself again. After sharing with him my own ambitions of wanting to be a cancer research specialist, he beamed with pride. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree," he said, and transferred me to the best high school in the area. It took a little bit of time, but I felt like I could really trust this man, my real father. One day, I decided to tell him what happened with the family that adopted me and how they treated me. When I was done speaking, his face turned so red, I had never seen anyone so angry in all of my life.
We need to make them pay for treating you like that. They brainwashed you, treated you like a slave, and you were just a child. Unacceptable.
Because he owns a big technology company, he works with a lot of lawyers. He called a meeting with them and had me sit in on it. In the boardroom that day, he sat calmly in his big executive chair and said to his team of lawyers, "You are my hired team of lawyers. I pay you to get my legal matters in order. I want you to stop everything you're doing and ruin the family that dared to take advantage of my daughter." His words sent a chill up my spine. That team of lawyers worked fast. Soon, the story of my abuse was on every news channel, every hour of every day. It quickly turned into a court case that was aired on television. My father sued my fake parents and won the trial. Not only did the court dissolve my adoption, but it also ruled that they were to pay me back every cent that they had earned for child support while I was under their care for the last 16 years that I was with them. They knew that they could never pay me back, and resorted to begging and pleading for me to forgive them.
We only wanted what was best for our daughter. We didn't do anything that bad, really. Do you know how much work it is to take care of 2 children? It's only natural that you helped us.
After their abuse was aired everywhere, no one would hire them. They resorted to selling everything that they owned except the clothes on their backs. Shelley tells me that they've had to sleep on the floor like I had to for the past 16 years. After they had nothing else to sell, they resorted to selling their house and living out of a tent. To this day, they are still in the streets, still begging for money to pay me back. Lucy didn't do much better. No one wanted anything to do with her. Without me around to tutor her, her grades quickly declined and got so far behind that she had no option but to drop out of school. She became so tired of the various death threats that she decided to change her name and live somewhere else. As for me and my new family, with my father and Shelley's family, I couldn't be happier. I was miserable for so much of my life and thought that was normal. But now that I know what true love, kindness, and support are, I'll never settle for anything less for the rest of my life. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.